What's up, guys? Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Katie Kleber, and today is a day where we are going to chat specifically about interview stuff. Now, specifically, I'm saying that word a little too much. Let's bring it down a notch. So, when we are getting a new job, you go through the interview process, right? And as a newbie, I was very much like, "Dear Lord, anyone who will take me, please give me a job." Well, here's the deal. When you do an interview, it is a mutually beneficial business partnership. You need to make sure that they're like legit too, because if we get a job at a terrible hospital, with a terrible employer who doesn't care, we're going to be leaving soon, right? Like we're just like, I can't stand this. I can't be here. So we want to look out for some red flags. I don't know about you, but I would rather work in a well managed and run clinic than a toxic ICU. Okay? Like, you do not want your job to suck your soul dry and dread work every day. That is not why you paid $100,000 and dedicated 4 to 5 years of your life to get a bachelor's, like, or whatever it is. Like, we're going to make sure that our job works for us too. So, when you're going through the interview process, I want you to pay attention to specific red flags. I talk about these red flags more in depth. And I said specific again. Come on. I talk about it more in my hired course. So it's my course that helps you get interview process and all the things with the resume. It's been around for a little while. We've had some great feedback from the course. Molly said, great job on the hired course. It's a very nice explanation of the hiring process and resume building. We got an anonymous one that said the fresh hire and hired course significantly increased my confidence and prep for job interviews, leading me to secure my first job immediately. What? All the content, especially the question and answer database with videos, helped me a lot in preparing my interviews. Carolina said, for me, it was life-changing. I used to commit a lot of the mistakes without knowing it, and it was super helpful to read about them, particularly the resume template and all of the questions and answers. Last one, using your hired course as a guide, I crafted a resume and cover letter, was promptly invited to an interview. I was expecting a one-on-one with a manager, but it was a panel interview with 4 people from the ICU. I'm so glad I listened to your podcast and went through the hired behavioral interview questions. I was super nervous, but also felt well prepared. Clearly, it was an effective process because I got a call the next day and they were offering me an ICU position in their new grad program. Great job, Shannon. That is from June of last year. So, helping people get their jobs. And in that process, we're going to figure out if the place is a good place for you to work, because you are an asset. You're not just someone who will do any nursing job. We want you to have a good nursing job. Okay. So let me pull up and talk to you about my red flags for you to observe during the interview process. So again, this content comes from Hired. This is from my section called Impeccably Impressive Interviews. Now, in some of those testimonials, they mentioned the behavioral questions. I have a question and answer database where I go through the top questions that people get in nursing interviews, and I explore what they're really getting at when they're asking that question and how you can craft an answer that accurately speaks to your experience. I am not going to give you cut and paste answers because that's inauthentic and not appropriate at all. And honestly, against my ethics. Not gonna lie. I'm not gonna tell you like, yes, here's the right things to say to get what you want. It's let me tell you how you can consider your own experience and create a authentic answer to that question. But let's pull back to the red flags for you to observe during the interview process. Red flag number 1 is they barely ask you any questions. Are they just looking for someone with a pulse? You don't want to work on that unit, let me tell you, because there's a reason people are not on that unit. Now, if it's a brand new unit and you're looking to be one of the first people on the unit, that's a little different than if this is a unit that's been around a long time and we have 10 managers in the last 6 months and no one will stay on that unit. They have a problem staffing a unit, and while you would love to help people fix things, I don't think that's a great one, especially if you're a brand new nurse. Next one, high turnover rate. I tend to ask that question in interviews. If the company overall has a high turnover rate, that's a concern. Now, granted, so I would want to know, what is the company nursing turnover rate, um, big picture, and then what is this unit's specific turnover rate? So I looked up because this changes, but the latest numbers of turnover. Um, let's see, come from a report, NSI Nursing Solutions 23-24 National Healthcare Retention and RN Staffing Report, as well as Daily Pay's 2024 update on healthcare turnover. Those are my sources, people. So the national turnover rate is about 18.4%, which actually is better than it has been. So that means, let's say we'll round up like 20%. So for 100 nurses, 20%, we're going to be not there the next year. Okay. So, although a lot more nurses are at a hospital. So, now granted, there was a peak with COVID, not surprising there. Turnover looks like it went all the way up to 27% during COVID. But it looks like, in the hospital, 20.7% in 2024. So the nursing as a whole, 18.4%. Hospitals specifically, 20%. Understandable. We got more of an acute care, fast pace, so is 20%. Turnover rates are pretty impactful. I think this is super interesting. They incur pretty high costs for hospitals, ranging from $45,000 to $67,000 per nurse. That's another reason why I create my stuff, because I don't want you to turnover. I don't think that we should have high turnover rates. We should be going to a job and accepting a job with eyes wide open, knowing what to expect and be able to perform, and they should be able to provide us with good support. So we want to know, what is the turnover rate at this hospital? If they say, or in this unit, if this unit has a 40% turnover rate, yikes. Another way you can ask it is, what is the longest that someone, like when you think about the staff on this unit, who's been there the longest? Like, what's the average amount of time that someone has been on this unit? If they say like less than a year, that's a little concerning. When I started my job in a neuro ICU years ago, that unit had nurses that had been on that unit for like 10 years. Like, they stayed there, which I was like, green flag, green flag. Really wanted to stay there or get a job on that unit, because that meant they had a good leader in place. People wanted to stay there. The work is doable. You don't stay at a job for 10 years if you can't do it. So I really liked that. So I want to know, how long are people here? What's the most experienced person? What kind of precepting? Tell me about your preceptors. Like, who's your highest performing preceptor? That kind of thing. All right, that was my second red flag. My third red flag is poor communication. So, like, if you can't ever, well, in general, keep in mind, you might be applying for a position where there's a hiring manager over 50 positions. You have a nurse manager who's interviewing tons of people. You may have some lapse in communication. I think that is a little bit expected to have a little bit of a challenge there. However, if they don't like tell you basic information, or, hey, can you come to an interview right now? And then they don't tell you where to go. Or like, you want to notice, how bad is this communication? And is this what I can expect if I work here? So another one would be lack of transparency. So if their company is not like kind of transparent about the hiring process, their expectation, their culture, if you're getting super generic answers in the interview process, like, don't love that. And I have another podcast episode where I'm going to go through very specific questions that you can ask in an interview to assess some of this stuff further. Now, next one with a little bit of a caveat is negative reviews. So keep in mind, hospitals are dealing with people in terrible moments of their lives at a very high volume. And granted, yes, healthcare is very expensive. People should be getting their money's worth. And in the perfect world, the hospital is for the amount of money you're paying, you're getting a premium service where everything is perfect, right? It is like that Airbnb, the superhost, 5 out of 5 stars. That's not unfortunately realistic. You are going to have unhappy people and lack of and drops in communications and things like this. You are going to see some not. I think even the best hospitals are going to have not great reviews on like Google and whatnot. But if we're looking at things like Glassdoor and people are saying some highly concerning things, that's a little bit of a red flag there. Now you know, keep it all in context. You could be at a hospital that might be challenging, but your specific unit is great. Keep that in mind. But, and this shouldn't be the whole picture, but something you consider. Unrealistic expectations is another one. So if you have, they expect you to work your 3 shifts, mandatory overtime, now you have to do swing shifts and this kind of thing. That might not be cool. I mean, might not. That is not cool. Um, if that company is expecting, you to make $25 an hour and, you got your master's and, well, they're expecting you to like go way above and beyond what you're being paid for and act like that's the norm. I would not be loving that. If there's a lack, or excuse me, the next one is unprofessional behavior during that interview process. So, if you are walking into your interview and they're vaping or they're on the phone and unprofessionally talking about a work situation on the phone in front of you, a complete stranger, not cool. That's unprofessional. If they start cursing, that is, I know we're in this culture where a lot of people do that on the regular, but we're in a professional setting. If the manager starts dropping the F-bomb, gossiping about employees, if they're doing that with you, a complete stranger, they will do that about you to another complete stranger. So if I see lack of professional behavior in that interview process, no, thank you. Granted, if people are getting to the point where they're a hiring manager or a manager, they're not going to exhibit that theoretically. But if you notice that, that is a very big concern, people. And I should say that when you go, typically the way nursing interviews go is you do go through like a screening process first. Remember, nurse managers are very busy. They're not going to interview everybody. They need to have somebody screen these nurses before the serious candidates are put in front of the nurse manager. Okay. So typically what happens is an HR department has a hiring person in charge of hiring nurses, maybe for a specific service line, a specific program, or whatever it might be. So you're probably going to sit down with a nurse hiring manager first before you would sit down with the nurse manager of that unit. Okay. So keep that in mind when you're observing things. Like for the most of mine would go to the HR official place. They would make sure I'm an appropriate person to be employed by this hospital. And then once I pass that screening, then I would actually get to talk to the nurse manager of the unit I could possibly be working on. So keep that in mind. All right. Other red flags. There's no growth opportunities. Maybe they don't care if you're certified. They don't have a clinical ladder. They don't have any tuition reimbursement. It's just come here, work as a nurse, bye. We want to see that they're kind of investing in the nurses' professional growth, because when nurses grow professionally, they provide better care. So we want to see things like financial incentives for professional development. Like, if they have a clinical ladder, do you get paid more for climbing that ladder? If you get a specialty certification, do you get a bonus? Do you get more money for that? Is there opportunities for you to, specialize? Like if you're working in the ICU, can you do formal training to run CRT or something like that? Do you provide tuition reimbursement, or do you have partnerships with various colleges with lower tuition so that your nurses can get more education? That's something you want to see. You want to see that they have, hey, what's your policy on tuition reimbursement and continuing education, like that kind of stuff. So here's a red flag that maybe you were not anticipating. I really dislike it when hiring managers and nurse managers, and actually managers in any capacity, not just nursing, refer to staff as family. Let me tell you why. Work is not my family. My family is my family. Okay. Your family you go to bat for, and sometimes you have to extend beyond what you're capable of doing, and you make it work. You do whatever you can for your family. Work is work. Okay. I am here to show up with my professional license as a registered nurse and provide the service that I am contractually obligated to provide and that you are going to compensate me for. My colleagues are not like, I do not view them like my children and my husband and my mother. Like, I just don't. And I don't think that's professional work boundaries to do that. Because if you're the family, if this is a family atmosphere and we're a family, then that means that you're going to have really, your boundaries are really porous. They're really malleable. You're going to be able to be, oh no, we're a family. Can you stay late? Oh my gosh, we're swamped. Can you please stay late? Help your family out, your work family. No, I'm a professional nurse. This is my job. This isn't my family. Okay. And I think that when we do start to think about work as our family, then that can make over identifying with mistakes and really crossing boundaries into getting to burnout and that kind of stuff so easy that I'm like, guys, yes, I care about my work professionals and supporting everybody, but this isn't my family. Now we can have an atmosphere where we really help each other out and we care about a lot, like help making sure nobody's drowning and whatnot. Yeah, that's great. But at the end of the day, this is still my job. And if I quit today, you're going to fill that position tomorrow. That's not the same thing with my family. If I die today, it's life changing for my family. Me not being in this position is not life changing for this unit. You will still soldier on. Okay. So if I hear, oh, we're a really big family. Oh, we're just such a family. That's like a red flag for me. Okay. Next one is a poor benefits package. I do want you to be informed and aware of what is appropriate benefit package. And that might be harder for you if you're brand new and this is your first time in the workforce and learning about 401ks and things like that. But you want to make sure you have a decent benefits package. And I know nurses who will work PRN at 2 different hospitals and buy their own insurance on the open marketplace because it ends up being a better deal. So you can do really innovative ways, or there are innovative ways to maximize your worth and your marketability, that kind of thing. So you might not, the best option for you might not be a full-time employee at this hospital and work there till you die. Why not? And my nurse buddy that I talk about all the time, Kelsey Rawl, she has a great little program that helps people figure out these innovative ways she calls it crafting your dream career. And that's absolutely what it is, because a nursing license is such an asset and you can craft that career in a plethora of different ways. So I'll put a link to her membership in this episode description. Last one. I want you to know what the orientation experience is going to be like, whether you are experienced or brand new. So if you're brand new nurse, my hope is if you're at a decent hospital that they've got a structured onboarding support system for new graduates. They're not just going to, give you 2 weeks of orientation and send you on your own. That is not adequate to safely perform that job to that level as a new nurse. You need few months at least with in orientation, ideally also having a residency program. I do have my programs that I feel like do help people quite a bit as they go through orientation, but it's not a replacement for weeks of in-person like training. So don't if they don't have a very clear answer of what your orientation and onboarding process looks like, that is concerning. Years ago, I don't think it's the same now, but one of the first jobs I applied for was they were like, yeah, well, we have someone who comes out of nursing school. We used to do this, but now I think we're going to try this. And to me, that was like a little nerve wracking because the other hospital was like, we have an established residency program. You will have 12 weeks of orientation. You will do X number of shifts on night shift and X number of shifts on day shift. This is how we do it. Like that was much better to me. And I actually ended up going with that hospital, even though the hourly pay was a little less. It was like, I know I need a lot of support becoming a new nurse. And I needed some much more structure than the other one was going to provide. So that can be a big red flag if there's not great structure for the new nurse. Now, if you're an experienced nurse, you should still have great support. Now, it's one thing if you worked at this hospital before and you know this patient population, yeah. But if, let's say you worked in a different hospital, then you took 5 years off and had babies, and now you're coming back, like, you're going to be new gradish. Like, if this is a new hospital, you're not used to their charting system, you're not used to their processes. Like, I mean, when I went on maternity leave, they changed how we did labs and the IVs, I think. Oh, I can't even remember. I had a couple babies or which one's which, but I remember being like, I have been gone for 3 months and I'm having trouble staying on top of my time management. Like, that was a bit of a shock to me. So I really want you to know, hey, what is realistic and helpful for me to be successful on this unit? Because showing me around the unit and saying, all right, good luck, and I have like one shift of orientation is not going to be adequate for someone starting in an acute care position. Okay. If you've had, like, actually one of the hospitals that I've worked at before, and I did like how they had this set up, was if you had been out of bedside acute care practice for a certain amount of time, then you were automatically required to go through their residency program because the learning curve is so steep. So you want to make sure that as a new employee at a hospital, that they have a clearly defined orientation process. So let me review, people. I'll give you my quick hitters. My red flags during the interview process. Number 1, barely asking any questions. Number 2, high turnover rate. Number 3, poor communication. Number 4, lack of transparency. Number 5, a lot of negative reviews and feedback. Number 6, unrealistic expectations. Then I'm unprofessional behavior, lack of growth opportunities, referring to the staff as a family, poor benefits package, and insufficient orientation. I hope that will help empower you to make a better decision and notice these things throughout your interview process. This isn't stuff where you call out, hey, I notice you're being unprofessional right now. No. Just notice this stuff and help it inform your decision making as you figure out which hospital you're going to work for, because you're an asset. You're a nurse. You got bring stuff to the table, and I want you to confidently express, like, be able to exude that they would be crazy not to hire you. But we need to be able to communicate that in a not arrogant way. So that, again, I go through that, as you can imagine. I can go through that pretty in depth in my hired course. So if you want to check out the hired course, I've got a link to it in the description of this video. And I've got a link to my new grad toolkit. What else? All the things. And then we're also having a Black Friday sale. Woohoo! Great time for the tool for checking out hired and all that. So make sure you pay attention, get on our email list so you can get all the good updates on sales and things like that. And thanks, nurses. Stay fresh.